everyone. Welcome to those of you who are trickling in. Thank you for joining us. We're going to let folks trickle in for about 60 seconds here, just the first minute, and then we'll get started. And in the meantime, if you just want to pop into the comments section where you're joining us from, that'd be great. Here, Rochester, New York, UK. I'm in Bethlehem, PA, near Allentown. I'll just give another welcome as our numbers are going up here. We're just going to give it a few more seconds, and then we'll get kicked off as folks trickle in. Thank you for joining us. Hey, Allentown, just a few minutes from me. Just pop into the chat where you're joining us from while we wait. We're going to get started in just a second here. I see it. Go Birds. All right. I'm going to kick us off here. Welcome to today's webinar, Expanding Horizons, Searching for the Ideal Early Feasibility Study Location. I'm Vernon Baker, your moderator for today's session, a senior medical device guru here at Greenlight Guru. We're just going to do a little quick housekeeping before we dive into our presentation. First, we invite you to actively participate. A lot of you have already found the chat tab, but it is over to the right of the panel. You can chat with fellow attendees. Also note the Q&A tab where you can ask questions for the Q&A session later. Note that you can also upvote or thumbs up questions, and we will try to prioritize those that are most upvoted. So you can take a look at the QA tab, see what's there, and then give it a thumbs up for the questions that you're interested in hearing the answers to. Second, and I'll probably say this a couple of times, I'll be a broken record, we will be sending out the full recording and presentation slides to everyone who registered after the live event. So just watch your inbox for that follow-up email. It should come in an email. Takes a little while to process, but you should have that just shortly after the event. So look out for it. Okay. At Greenlight Guru, our mission is to improve the quality of life through our work in the medtech industry. And it's likely a shared goal of many of you who are here today. That's why you're here. We host these free webinars to share valuable insights and learn from top industry experts like our speaker today, and to showcase our industry-leading solutions. So our software is designed to help medtech companies bring life-changing products to patients faster, more efficiently, and with less risk. And it includes software solutions for product development, quality management, and clinical data management that are all tailored specifically for the med device industry. So you can join over 1,100 leading medtech companies that trust Greenlight Guru by visiting greenlight.guru for your personalized demo after today's webinar. So now, without further ado, to introduce our presenter for today. Anna Nikitina is the head of business development and legal at Clinical Accelerator, a contract research organization, a CRO, specializing in conducting clinical investigations of innovative medical devices across all major therapeutic areas, with a particular focus on the cardiovascular field. Anna holds an LLB degree from University of College London, UK, providing a strong foundation in regulatory and compliance matters, and has spent 5 years working at Clinical Accelerator, handling legal oversight, business development, and clinical trial management of early feasibility studies and first-in-human trials with international medtech companies. So without further ado, let's get into today's presentation. Thank you, Anna, and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vernon, for that introduction. And thank you so much for having me today. It's a great pleasure to be here talking on the topic of early feasibility studies. So today, my goal is to provide you all with a comprehensive understanding of early feasibility studies, their significance, the challenges that they present, how to effectively navigate through them, and how to find your ideal EFS location. But before we dive into the specifics, first I'd like to start with the fundamentals and begin with a definition of what exactly EFS studies are and why they are important. So what is an early feasibility study? An early feasibility study is a limited clinical investigation of a device early in development. It typically enrolls a small number of patients, usually around 5 to 10, and these studies evaluate device design with respect to initial clinical safety and device functionality. Now, EFS studies are crucial because they serve as the first step in translating preclinical innovation into real-world application. And these studies, they provide immense value to many different key stakeholders. So beginning with study sponsors, with EFS studies, sponsors can use this data to assess the usability and performance of their device in a real-world clinical setting. Using this data, they can also identify potential modifications that may be required to their device to optimize implantation or delivery or durability of their device. This data can also be used to help refine then their device design. Can also help with validating endpoints and fine-tuning inclusion and exclusion criteria for later stage studies. And of course, this data is majorly helpful with raising your next series. But taking a broader perspective, EFS studies benefit many other stakeholders as well, beyond just the sponsor of the clinical trial. So you have patients first and foremost who are able to have access to novel treatments when they may otherwise not have suitable solutions. Clinical sites and investigators benefit as well because they're able to again have this access to novel treatments for their patients who may not have viable options, and it gives them an opportunity as well to be involved early in groundbreaking research, familiarize themselves with the device, and make themselves advocates for its future adoption. Regulators then also benefit because they're able to then assess the safety and feasibility of your device, and it helps build credibility to your device. And finally, investors also benefit, and ultimately you as a sponsor, because early clinical data, it is a significant milestone in the funding life cycle of a medtech startup. And strong EFS study results, they demonstrate proof of concept and provide confidence to investors who are often hesitant to fund development until they see this tangible human data. Great. Now that we've covered what EFS studies are and why they're important and all of the key stakeholders that are involved, the next important question to ask is, when should I start my EFS study? And the answer in short to this is as early as possible, once you reach the point where one, further non-clinical testing will not advance or benefit your device development. Number two, all expected device risks have been reduced as far as possible through bench testing, third-party testing, and any animal testing. And number three, clinical data is now required to move forward and progress. So once all of this criteria is hit, then you are ready to move on with your early feasibility study. So where should you conduct your early feasibility study? This is the main key point of this presentation. Well, EFS studies are a global business, really, and but selecting the right location can have a profound impact on the speed, cost, and overall success of your study. And today, companies, they have multiple options. So you have the United States, of course, and thanks to the FDA's EFS initiative, the US has become quite an attractive option for early stage studies. You have the European Union as well, which has traditionally been a very popular option, a very popular destination, although regulatory complexities have increased now with the introduction of the MDR in the last few years. And then you have other locations as well, OUS and OEU. So these are places like Australia and New Zealand. You also have Central and South America, and then places like Eastern Europe and Eurasia. So a couple examples would be Georgia and Uzbekistan. So these US OEU locations have become more popular recently because they offer more, often offer more streamlined regulatory environments. They have cost-effective aspects to them, and have often high patient enrollment rates. So, but if we have so many different options, how do you choose the right location? Well, first, what you need to do is identify and evaluate the main challenges that arise with early feasibility studies. And then after you know the challenges, you can then analyze which location is best suited to overcome these challenges. So let's go through a few of them. I've listed a few today. So number one, although first-in-human and early feasibility studies are quite small in scope, they can still nonetheless be very expensive. And the problem is that investors, they're eager to see the results of first-in-human and EFS studies, but they're often not so keen to fund them. So you need this funding to cross this so-called valley of death between preclinical and clinical stages. And additionally, you can also have high regulatory and operational costs in certain countries, which can add to the challenge. Another challenge is the regulatory burden, which can be quite significant, although it does vary by geography, of course. But nonetheless, you have challenges in terms of the bench preclinical and V&V testing that you need to pass. And in many regions, the clinical trial approval process can also be quite lengthy and unpredictable. So the third challenge is finding the right sites and the right investigators for your study, which is critical to the success of your study. You need to select sites and investigators who have suitable infrastructure, clinical competence, access to patients, and are actually willing to participate in studies with novel high-risk devices. Because many leading clinical centers of excellence might be great at large industry-sponsored studies, but they can often be not the best choice for a smaller first-in-human study organized by a medtech startup, because these studies, they carry higher risks and require additional oversight. The fourth challenge is patient enrollment. It is not easy to enroll patients into studies with novel high-risk devices. It is often said that slow patient enrollment is the #1 cause of delays in clinical studies, especially when the inclusion and exclusion criteria are quite stringent. So it's very important that you're able to initiate your studies fast and enroll your patients in a fast and efficient manner. And the last challenge is obtaining, oh, 1 second. I have lost my slides. There we go. And the last challenge is obtaining clean and quality data. And this can prove to be quite difficult with the wrong partners. So you really need to make sure that the data that is produced out of your study is clean, it is of high quality, and is acceptable by all relevant stakeholders. So that means regulators, investors, and clinicians. So to ensure this, it is highly important that you engage with the right partners for your study. So having discussed the key challenges of conducting an EFS, let's now examine what exactly makes an ideal EFS location. So on this slide, you'll find some characteristics that you can use to help assess the locations that you might be considering for your early feasibility study. So let's go through them together. So your ideal EFS location should have a streamlined regulatory environment, which allows you then to enter the clinic early. Your ideal EFS location should have well-equipped clinical sites with modern good infrastructure and all of the relevant equipment and technology. You then in turn need to have enthusiastic and well-trained investigators who will be sure to actually deliver on your project. Your ideal location should have access to a well-characterized patient population to ensure rapid and efficient patient enrollment. Your location should have committed site leadership and on-site clinical trial support staff to help assist with coordination and execution. And finally, in your location, you should find and have access to a reliable clinical trial management partner to help with navigating the regulatory and logistical complexities, as well as ensuring that the day-to-day management during your study runs smoothly and that clean data is obtained. So all of these factors and characteristics together translate into fast enrollment, high quality data, and hopefully ideally reasonable costs as well. So now let's revisit some of the options we discussed earlier, some of the location options, and evaluate how they measure up against our EFS criteria. So starting with the United States, historically, the US was not a very popular location actually for EFS studies. Before 2013, medical device companies often tended to conduct their early stage research elsewhere because in the United States we had very long FDA approval timelines and very high costs. And in order to then in 2013, the FDA introduced their EFS IDE guidance, which aimed to streamline this process and overcome some of these challenges that were prevalent prior to 2013 and encourage innovation in the United States. The future, however, we have a slight caveat here. It's a little bit unclear now how things will progress under the recent new administration that we have. But focusing on the current EFS initiative that is currently in place, there are quite a few different characteristics and benefits to it. So under the EFS initiative, approvals are given in a more expedited manner now in comparison to prior to 2013 and in comparison to traditional IDEs. Approvals are granted on less preclinical data for EFS studies than required for pivotal studies. You also have access to the FDA, that you can have quite rapid dialogue between you yourself as a sponsor and the FDA during the review process. Under this initiative, the FDA aims to approve approximately 60 EFS studies per year, which is a quite considerate number. And the FDA aims to be quite efficient with having a target of less than 60 days for review. So they have this 60-60-60 day goal, which is illustrated in the little diagram on the right there. So this goal is to have 60 days to obtain IRB approval, 60 days for clinical trial execution, and 60 days to first patient in. And then we have some other advantages as well to conducting studies in the US. You have, aside from all of the benefits under the EFS initiative, you have this early engagement with the FDA. You, of course, also have availability to rather excellent sites. And you also have the English language, of course, being the main language within the country, and very easy travel for US sponsors, or perhaps even no travel, depending on where you're located and where your study center is. However, while there are a lot of advantages, there are still quite a few challenges that remain in the United States. So you have, nonetheless, lengthy contract negotiations despite the EFS initiative, which aims to reduce the time required to finalize contracting. You still have extended startup timelines, unfortunately. So studies can still often take 6+ months to reach first patient in, despite the 60-60-60 day initiative. You also have issues with patient recruitment, reimbursement issues, and nonetheless, costs still remain rather high, with the US being one of the most expensive markets for clinical research. The good news is that the FDA recognizes these issues and is currently developing an EFS 2.0 initiative in order to further refine the process and address these challenges that still remain. But referring a little bit back to the caveat, it's still yet to be, it is to be determined how this will progress now under the new administration. So moving on to the European Union. So for many years, Europe was a preferred destination for early stage research, particularly prior to the FDA's EFS initiative. Many companies turned to Europe for their early feasibility studies due to the stringent regulatory requirements and due to the less stringent regulatory requirements that they could find in the EU and faster approval processes. However, with the introduction of the MDR, regulatory complexity has increased, causing delays in such approvals. And additionally, each member state also interprets MDR differently, leading to inconsistencies in the approval process. And as a result, sponsors are looking for alternative, more predictable EFS locations. So to address this challenge, the EU has launched this HEU EFS project, which aims to create a harmonized framework for conducting EFS studies in the EU and to enhance Europe's competitiveness by streamlining regulatory pathways. But while this initiative is promising, it does remain in development, and many sponsors do continue to search for alternative global locations. And this is where locations OUS, OEU come into play. So quite a few different locations have become quite attractive for early feasibility studies due to their streamlined regulatory pathways, their lower costs, and faster patient enrollment. So we have a few examples here. So one is Australia and New Zealand, which have a simplified regulatory process under the clinical trial notification scheme that they have there. There are also R&D tax incentives in Australia, which allow for recovery of up to 43.5% of eligible trial costs, which is very good, although this does require you to incorporate a company within the country. And then, of course, the two locations have a very good reputation with English as first language and very good site infrastructure. Central and South America is another example which has a very simplified regulatory process, access to a large treatment-naive population, and you can find much more reasonable costs there, although this does come together with older infrastructure at study centers. Finally, there's also Eastern Europe and Eurasia. So that's places like Georgia and Uzbekistan, which have become quite popular. So here you'll find regulatory approvals within 6 to 8 weeks, high patient recruitment rates, quite modern site infrastructure, and strong investigator engagement in all therapeutic areas. These two countries also have a growing reputation for quality data accepted by international regulators. You do have direct flights from major US, EU cities, so that simplifies travel, although of course not as simple as if it's the study centers being within your own country. And the majority are English speaking. Now, I'd like to take a little time now to focus more on Georgia specifically, which has emerged in recent years as a popular location for both first-in-human and EFS studies, and discuss why exactly this is the case. So one of the biggest advantages of conducting EFS studies in Georgia is its streamlined regulatory environment. So we have a very short approval timelines of just 2 weeks being required for ethics committee approval, and then 3 to 4 weeks for regulatory approval. At the same time, site contracting can be conducted in parallel, and the overall startup period is approximately 2 months, which is quite significantly short in comparison to what can be found in the United States and within the EU. Georgia's clinical research ecosystem is also well established with a network of experienced and committed sites, very good infrastructure and equipment, dedicated clinical research coordinators which support patient recruitment, site management and compliance, very experienced investigators. And to date, over 150 EFS studies have actually successfully been conducted in Georgia, demonstrating its reliability as a premier research hub. Now, one of the most critical factors for any clinical trial is access to patients. So as we mentioned, the number one cause of delays is slow patient enrollment. And so Georgia excels quite well in this area. So sponsors benefit from quite a large accessible patient population, which reduces delays in recruitment. Many EFS studies are actually complete their enrollment in Georgia in just a few months, which is faster than traditional markets. Additionally, there's also quite a lot of flexibility that can be found in the countries in terms of accommodating sponsors' demands, including pre-screening very early. Sites often work on weekends, so you can schedule cases and group patients together if the procedures are elective. So really shortening the amount of time that a sponsor needs to spend within the country, economizing on both their time and their travel. And at the end of the day, A trial is only as valuable as the quality of data that it generates. So quality data is ensured by close CRO supervision, which can be found in Georgia. And the country also has a track history of company audits and regulatory inspections. So 24 FDA inspections have been conducted within the country, and all have ended in NAI, no action indicated. And this makes Georgia actually the only country in the world to achieve 100% NAI. And finally, there's also reasonable cost, which can be found within the country, making Georgia quite a top-tier location for EFS studies. Now for a quick overview of Uzbekistan, as well as a newer location that has come up, OUS OEU. So this is a relatively newer player in the early feasibility study landscape, but it has rapidly gained a strong reputation in the space and mirrors quite a lot of the advantages that can also be seen in Georgia. So we have similarly a very streamlined regulatory process with only National Ethics Committee approval required. These meetings are held monthly, and so study approvals can be, the whole study startup period can be achieved within just 1 month. You also have quite excellent actually, patient access, because the country has a population of almost 40 million people, and 3 million people alone living in the capital city of Tashkent. So this bodes extremely well for fast and efficient patient enrollment. Again, you have a growing network of committed sites supported by experienced investigators committed to high quality research, and also quite a good proven track record, although a newer one. In the past 2 years, for example, our company, Clinical Accelerator, has successfully conducted over 40 first-in-human and EFS studies in the country, showing its rapid growth. And then finally, we maintain this high quality data. So this is ensured by close CRO supervision, stringent site monitoring, and adherence to international ICH GCP standards. So when you get to the point of starting to think about your first-in-human and EFS study, it is very important to engage a CRO partner in your chosen region very early to assist you with setup and implementation of your clinical study. On this slide, I've just put a little bit of information about our company, Clinical Accelerator, and our areas of operation. So as an organization, our focus is on accelerating clinical development programs of medtech companies, hence the name Clinical Accelerator. And we do this through facilitating early entry into the clinic and ensuring fast and efficient patient enrollment. So due to all of the benefits mentioned in the previous slides, we personally choose to place our first-in-human and EFS studies in places OUS, OEU, in locations like Georgia and Uzbekistan. And then we also work in quite a few EU locations, but remaining within Eastern focus. So you can find those countries listed there on the left. So our network allows us to have access to 150 million patients spanning both European and Asian ethnicities. We have access to 60 plus dedicated clinical sites with state-of-the-art technology and highly trained personnel. Our average timelines range from 52 to 90 days for startup, depending on the location. And in total, we've executed 200 plus successful EFS studies from submission to completion. So if anyone's interested in having a conversation about how we operate in more detail or how we run our studies, etc., feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to share my email. Maybe it's already included at some point. So happy to have a chat. So how do we practically execute an EFS study? So here I'm just going to go through, walk through a little bit of a step-by-step process of the startup phase specifically. So the process begins with the sponsor company providing all of the study documentation required for submission. Most notably, this is the clinical protocol, which includes details such as the device description, risk management framework, procedure, patient population, and endpoints. Other key study documentation includes the investigator's brochure and from consent form and other auxiliary documents, but these are the main three that you would need to focus on. The sponsor, of course, also supplies the investigational product and ensures training and case proctoring for the study investigators is needed. Your CRO would then be involved and would work closely with the clinical site and investigator to ensure trial readiness. We would handle all of the submission process together with the sponsor and secure all of the necessary approvals. And then once we obtain trial approval, the study is ready to proceed and we move on to the final step, which is, of course, performing the trial. So to demonstrate how this process unfolds a little and some of the timelines that can be associated in places like Georgia and Uzbekistan, I have a couple of real-world case studies of clients that have worked with us in these locations that we can go through. So starting off with one of our clients' first-in-human studies in Uzbekistan. For the sake of confidentiality, I will not be revealing names today, but the target indication for this study was aortic stenosis, and the device studied was a novel TAVI device. And the trial size for this study was an N of 15. So some of the challenges that we faced included obtaining regulatory approvals very quickly to meet this very stringent first-in-human target date that the company had. We needed to use one single investigative site to reduce inter-observer variability. And we needed to identify suitable patients that met the very, very narrow inclusion and exclusion criteria. So to address these challenges, we took a few different strategic steps. Number one, we aim to maximize efficiency during the startup phase by handling the document review, translations, and site documentation collation very quickly and swiftly. We also engaged we had our own site management and patient enrollment organization who was engaged early to conduct vigorous pre-screening. So for this study specifically, 30 patients were pre-screened, 4 were confirmed, and 2 were implanted in the very early phase of the study. Now let's take a look at the study timeline achieved with our work model. So we saved the sponsor quite a significant amount of time with submission preparation taking just 25 days. The screening of 30 patients was completed in 60 days, and the time to first patient in was 60 days in total. So despite the challenges that we faced in this study, we were still able to rapidly activate sites and recruit all of the suitable patients within a reasonable time frame, aligning with the sponsor's needs. So here you can see just a little chart which shows you a direct comparison of our timelines that we achieved for this study with the ideal timelines that the US EFS initiative targets, with a key difference of when a first patient in would be hit. Great. Now I have one more case study of another client that worked in Uzbekistan, and this time we can go just a tad deeper into the step-by-step process that was taken during the startup phase and enrollment phase. So this study was for an innovative resorbable embolization technology, which designed to relieve pain associated with knee osteoarthritis. So some of the key challenges for this study included identifying a modern cath lab with the right diagnostic and injection equipment. We needed, again, to use a single investigative site to ensure consistency and reduce inter-observer variability. We needed to find an investigator with experience with this specific and uncommon technology and uncommon access. And then we needed to find a site with an active database of patients with imaging in order to have rapid enrollment. So we approached these challenges by, one, conducting site visits to identify and verify capable investigators and facilities. In this case, several different sites were reviewed against the relevant criteria provided by the sponsor, and one specific site was identified as meeting all of the requirements and was pre-qualified. The site also had a good database of patients. The investigators were experienced, enthusiastic, and a reasonable study budget was quickly agreed in the study. Subsequently, our SMPEO, Site Management Organization team, was assigned to strengthen the site's human resources for clinical trial activities and to also assist with the site coordination and patient enrollment support. We provided a trial proposal and plan to the sponsor for approval, also in addition to ensure a smooth execution. So all of the essential documentation was reviewed for compliance with local regulatory requirements. In this study, the submission dossier was prepared in just 15 days and then submitted subsequently to the National Ethics Committee. The study was then approved, and the total study startup was concluded in just 42 days. The site was then initiated within just a few days of receiving all of the approvals, and first patient in was achieved exactly 1 week after study approval, resulting in a total time of 49 days to first patient in from the moment of receiving all study documentation and final versions. The patient enrollment of N of 15 was also completed within 80 days, which was in fact 90 days ahead of schedule, and there was a 0% dropout rate in this study. All the while, of course, intensive sponsor CRO communication was maintained throughout the study. The data was entered in full, verified promptly, and then based on successful implementation of this study, the sponsor then decided to extend this study and also start a new study with the same technology, but in a different indication. So this case study specifically illustrates, in our view, an example of what I suspect quite a few of you may agree is quite an ideal EFS scenario, with many of the ideal requirements at play, resulting in a very timely study performed efficiently and ending with verified clean data. So hopefully with these two example case studies, you can see better how an EFS study may unfold throughout the startup phase and how they can then be conducted efficiently, so that all key timeline targets are met and all patients are recruited efficiently. So this shows that by choosing the right location and choosing the right partner, you're able to leverage streamlined regulatory pathways. You can find well-equipped clinical sites, have rapid study startup times, accelerated patient enrollment, and then end with the most important point, which is the high-quality data. So now that we've explored a few different case studies of companies who successfully ran their studies OUS, OEU, an important question arises, and maybe a question that the audience already has in mind. What can I do with this data, OUS, OEU? Well, there's quite a few things actually that you can, quite a few number of ways that you can utilize this data. So number one, this early data from feasibility studies significantly de-risks your device, of course, and investors and stakeholders are more willing to support a project when they see validated early results. So with this strong data, you can then secure funding for your next study in the EU, in Western Europe, in the United States, or wherever else you're thinking of in your clinical strategy. Number two, as we all know, preclinical studies can inform you greatly about your device, but they do not replace in-human clinical studies. So your early clinical data may show that your device requires reiterations or improvements, and this can then help steer you in the right direction to then make those improvements and repeat then your EFS study with your Gen 2 device. Number three, in some cases, your early EFS study can actually be used for potential M&A opportunities. So a good number of our clients actually have managed to exit successfully solely from this early data that was acquired, OUS, OEU. And lastly, otherwise, once you have this robust data, early data, you can submit this data and move on to initiating a larger EFS study in the US, in the EU, or move potentially even directly to pivotal, which has recently been suggested as an option by the FDA. So one of the common concerns that medtech companies have is whether the FDA will accept data generated outside of the US. So over the years, the FDA has become increasingly open to reviewing OUS data, actually. While the agency emphasizes the importance of US-based EFS, they do understand that there are various factors in play that may limit a company from conducting all of their testing in the United States. This is mainly the funding and the time required to get to that point. So at its core, the FDA is a consumer protection agency with a dual mission of both protecting and promoting patient health. People often remember the protecting part and forget the promoting part. They want companies to progress and succeed to further options for patient treatment. They're not in the business of ensuring companies make money, but that patients are receiving safe and effective treatment. And this has then led to the acceptance over time of OUS data. And I'll move to the next slide. So this topic was actually very specifically discussed recently at the London PCR Valves Conference back in November in 2024. This was discussed in an expert panel session. So the session was titled Turning Your Idea into a Market-Ready Device, Innovating MedTech. And the session focused on critical pathways for bringing devices to market, identifying barriers and opportunities for efficient development, emphasizing the role of EFS studies and first-in-human studies as well. And during this session, one of the participants was Changfu Wu, who was representing the FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health. And during this session, he provided further clarity on how you can integrate OUS data into US regulatory submissions. And the main takeaway point of his contribution was that data is data, and the FDA will look closely at all data, regardless of where it comes from. The key point is ensuring that the study design and data quality align with FDA expectations. So no matter where you decide to run your EFS study, what is important clearly is engaging with regulators early. So you should inform the FDA of your clinical trial plans and study design, even if your first in human or EFS study is OUS. You should, it's always a great idea to get their approval on your study design, and then you can leverage this early OUS data that you collect to obtain further funding and initiate a larger EFS pivotal in the United States. The FDA it's very accessible, actually, and it's never too early to talk to them. It's important that you engage early and often with them throughout the entire life cycle of your device development. And there are multiple modes through which you can approach them. There's starting with the simplest, so you can just have an informal chat with an FDA staff, just something non-binding at a conference, for example. So attending industry events and having these informal direct conversations with FDA representatives can help provide you with quite valuable insights into expectations and best practices. Moving one step up from that, you can have an informational meeting with them, and you can receive informal feedback on your device, and you can ask any other questions that you may have about your device or study design, etc. So before launching your study, this informal meeting can be quite useful to help clarify all of these questions, not just also about your study design, validation, and data collection as well. And then one step above that are, of course, pre-sub meetings. So you can have these pre-sub meetings to help align your expectations with the FDA early, and it ensures that your V&V testing plan, verification, validation plan, and clinical study design plan will meet all of the regulatory requirements. And this can then help prevent costly delays down the road. So, and by keeping the FDA informed about your clinical trial plans, this then allows you, even if your first-in-human or EFS studies conducted OUS. It can help build a stronger case for your study for eventual market entry, ensures that you're in line with all of FDA's expectations, and you can leverage this OUS data and have it be accepted very happily by the FDA. So on that note, I will conclude my presentation and would like to summarize with the following points. So number one, EFS studies, the EFS conduct is a global business. We've assessed quite a few different options today that are out there. You have the US, which was traditionally not a very good location and has been increasingly popular due to the EFS initiative that was put in place. You have the EU, which was traditionally a very popular location and still is, although regulatory complexities have increased under the MDR. And then you have locations OUS, OEU, and these attractive locations have emerged and positioned themselves as very popular due to their streamlined regulatory environment, short startup timelines, fast and efficient patient enrollment. So all these options exist, but you need to take into consideration all of these ideal EFS factors when searching for the right site. When you choose a location, assess it against all of the criteria, see if it meets all of the challenges and is ideal, in fact, for your specific study. Number three, a good EFS location should advance you as a company to the next stage, whether that's securing investors, whether it means you improving your device and moving on with the Gen 2, or initiating later stage studies. Number four, it is never too early to start planning for your feasibility. So this means you should reach out to your CRO early and often to help with the preparation, the startup submission. And it also means you should talk to the FDA and other regulators early via informational meetings, pre-sub meetings, or as simple as just a casual conversation at a conference. And last point, number 6, regulators accept OUS, OEU data. What's important and is number one important is ensuring that your study is well designed and the data quality remains high. And with that, I thank you all for your time. I hope this presentation today provided you with a clearer view on how to navigate your EFS study and how to meet the end goal of streamlining your pathway to market and bringing your much needed novel technology to patients faster. I look forward to any questions you may have.